All right, welcome to Bonehead. I'm Joe Lewis.
And nobody else wants to introduce... Hey, you know what? Hold on. James, do you want to introduce yourself? James Thomas?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Killed Spot, they did. That's why I just went ahead. I wanted to get it over, pull it off like a hangnail.
They killed Spot. I'm going to put Yoda down now, but...
Welcome to Bonehead.
If Yoda disappears
That's where
later,
the credits come in, by the way.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom.
I don't think that's how our theme song sounds.
I'm so glad Daniel Hahn did that instead of us. Thank you, Daniel Hahn. All right, well, the credits are over. Anyway, today's subject are movies that were never made. Now, there are movies that were made that were not released.
Right.
The most famous one, there's probably a couple. One of them is the Fantastic Four film, correct?
Yes.
Directed by
Oley
Sassone. And what do we have for these people after this episode, next week's episode?
will be an interview with
Oley Sassone,
Bob
the
Barker,
director.
oddly enough.
I was going to say we resurrect Paul Lynde to talk about Hollywood Squares.
Oh, Paul Lynde. That was the world's worst
Oh,
Paul Lynde.
whatever. You all can keep your Paul Lynde. If it's not Charles Nelson Riley, nobody cares.
That's true. But
DNR, baby.
There's a few films that have been made that have never been released. Probably that's number two. Actually would say, to me, the Jerry Lewis when clown, what's it called?
The clowns that...
When the
The
clown
day
cried.
the clown cried.
It's probably the most famous.
Which exists and is now actually registered with the Congress.
But yeah, no. Here's the deal with that, right? So Jerry Lewis, the famous comedian, he just died last year, made a movie, if you've never heard of this, and this is a true story, look it up, called The Day the Clown Cried. And the basic plot of this is he's a clown, and they are in a concentration camp during World War II.
And they use him
To cheer the kids up.
and to lure them into the death chamber. The
Now,
gas
if this
chamber.
sounds a little familiar, like Life is Beautiful, somewhat, in the same way, yeah, there is. But so the story goes that Jerry Lewis thought the movie was so bad that he won't let it release. There's a couple of people that say they've seen it. Haley has fallen down on the ground behind the cameras. Are you good, Haley?
Yeah.
She could be trying to lure us to our death. This could be the day that Haley cried.
Did I lose
died.
you
What?
on about the clown at the concentration camp? Is that where you tuned out or what? Okay. Anyway,
You need a pillow.
so that one's probably the most famous because very few people have ever seen it.
And this is a true story. Somebody got a copy of the script and did a live stage show version of it, and they did it for a couple days, and then Jerry Lewis found out about it, and attorneys showed up.
Yes, absolutely.
And
So
it never got
he finally turned it over to the Library of Congress in 2015, and it is not allowed to be shown to 2024, which would have ensured that he'd be dead because he was already almost 90 years old.
Yeah.
So that's probably the most famous. Number two to me, though, is the Fantastic Four film that was shot for Corman. And like I said, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that because we have, by the way, Bonehead has the freaking director on our next episode. I just want to say, there you go. Thank you so much, Mick Strawn. It's a simulcast with our friends at
Dream Warrior Review.
You cannot say it and you forget the name every time.
Every time. But it was funny as I really liked it.
And I'm going to be offended because you keep looking at James to chime in on that. And I know the name. I feel like I'm being left out.
He knows the name of Nightscape Boogaloo.
Electric.
Now, from now on, Jed's going to have Nightscape Boogaloo in his head.
I know.
And Mick's partner, Kurt Thomas, is on the episode as well. I want to give a shout out to Kurt because their studio looks so much more, what's the word?
Studio-like?
Professional. Well, we've got all this. Maybe one day we might turn the camera so people can see the rest of the layer. I doubt it.
I doubt it.
I think that Canon WD-40 over there is what really pulls the room together, though. People need to see
that and the bodies. So,
well, that one's still alive.
Yeah, almost dead though. So that's a couple of the really famous ones. But there's a ton of movies that have never been made that were almost made that were in development.
Real quick, before we leave the ones that have been made that have never been released, I have to mention one, God's Behaving Badly, which was based on a book that was a pretty well-reviewed book. And it's about the gods of Olympus are real, but they've started to lose power. They still have their powers, but they settle in New York. Christopher Walken played Zeus, and this is within the past couple of years. Has a huge, famous cast along the lines of, if you watched our show for a while, I talked about the story of mankind. This was the same type of cast. Has A-list celebrities. The movie screened at one film festival, and everybody literally went, "What in the crap?" And it never was released. They pulled it from the film festival. It's never been.
But it was
since.
shot.
It was, that's why I said
It was
before
shot.
we leave.
And there's
before we leave, the ones that were shot, I wanted to mention that one because that's.
And there's
that's,
another one too that's actually there's called Dark Blood. It's actually River Phoenix's
Yes.
last movie.
And they did a Kickstarter to try to finish it.
Right, and it has been shown in a couple of film festivals as recently as a few years ago, but it's never been released either.
Is it because it's so terrible?
He died, I think, a couple of weeks before. I think most of it's been shot. It was done for all intents and purposes, but it's never really been. And I don't think it's really a terrible thing because it's also got Jonathan Pryce in it.
Huh.
And yeah, look it up. It exists, but they've never finished it. There's several reasons, and I think most of them have to do with attorneys and who owns the rights now after all this time.
Well, I was going to say, so jumping back to God's Behaving Badly, I just wanted to mention the cast on this because it's Alicia Silverstone, Sharon Stone, Christopher Walken, Robin Weigert, Edie Falco, John Turturro, Oliver Platt, Nelson Ellis, Rosie Perez, Felicia Rashad, and Asif Manvi.
Okay, I don't know who the last few people are, but yeah, you
Felicia
sure.
Rashad was in a little show.
No, the Felicia, the other one after the Felicia.
He's a comedian. How does he not know things?
Do you know who the last one was?
I didn't hear it, to be honest with you.
All I heard was, I'm
sorry.
Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken, I said first. That could not have been the one you heard last. He doesn't really.
I time travel. All right, so we ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So these are ones that were supposed to be made.
That never really got made.
That or they were written and they progressed and the studio was on
or
board.
they actually, in the case of Zemeckis' Yellow Submarine, there was actually shooting.
Yeah, that's
and plugs were pulled, right? Mm-hmm. James and I were talking about this really quick, I suppose. If you're a big Fango fan, Fangoria used to have the horror teletype at the front of it, and you look through it, all the projects are coming out. And it's great to go back through some of the older ones all the way from the early 80s to 90s of all the different filmmakers that were attached to so many different things, or things that are almost done that never actually made it.
I was going to say, the same thing with Wizards, the guy at the comics, as a comic book nerd. James Cameron's Spider-Man got write-up after write-up after write-up in Wizards, the Guide to Comics.
Toby Hooper was going to do a Spider-Man for Canon at one time. There's actually a poster you can go out and buy.
Yeah.
So many of those, though. So there were all these magazines. Magazines for you young kids were like online web pages that were printed. But yeah, tactile content. But those things, by the way, are disappearing too. But you used to be able to read about all these projects. Now you read about it on Ain't It Cool and all that. Mm-hmm. But that used to be how you found out.
Mm-hmm. Who wants to go first with theirs?
You go first.
Why?
Because mine's really long and detailed.
All right, I want to talk about Dune because there's a Jodorowsky was a filmmaker who's insane, but he made a movie called El Topo. Am I saying El Topo correctly? Yeah. And it was basically like an indie film that played at midnight screenings, similar to Rocky Horror. It was really famous in the 70s, and he made a follow-up to that, and that was really famous. So he got the rights to Dune, which would later be made by David Lynch, and then later
based
be made
on
for the science fiction.
The
Frank
Nebula and Hugo Award-winning
Frank Herbert's Dune, the book, right? So he got the rights, hired all these artists. If you get the chance to look at it, there's a Jodorowsky's Dunes. It's a documentary about how...
And not just artists. Like, Salvador Dali was involved.
A lot of people who went on to do Alien, okay?
Yes.
So we can get into a few more details about that. I don't want to, but it's a fascinating because it was going to be a huge epic in the 70s. It was going to be 3 and 4 hours long, millions and millions of dollars, and it just kind of fall through. And there's a great documentary, like I said, called Jodorowsky's Dune. If you get the chance, I have a copy of it. Check it out. It's interesting. It's fascinating. It was much more towards the book of a literal translation of the book, whereas, and I'm not knocking Lynch's Dune, I actually rewatched it and kind of liked it better than I did as a kid, but a lot of stuff is explained
Did you
in
watch the
voiceover.
extended version?
No, because that's not his version.
I know. I'm just always fascinated by it. I want to watch both of them again.
Isn't Dune one of those books, though, that it's hard? It would probably be hard to make a movie that's tells a good story without being confusing.
I don't know how you make Dune into a movie.
Yeah,
I know Denis Villeneuve, who just made Blade Runner, did Arrival. To me, he can do no wrong.
Give him time.
Prisoners, wonderful films if you get a chance to check them out. Sicario, he's a fantastic filmmaker. He wants to do it. I'm curious to see how he does it. I don't know. Because I feel the same way about The Dark Tower.
before that, Peter Berg was going to do a
I
version.
thought they
of
made a
Doom.
version of the Dark Tower. Watch this.
They did not make a version of the Dark Tower, did they, Haley?
Nope.
No, they made a movie and called it the Dark Tower,
Totally unrelated.
but it's unrelated to any book that Stephen King has ever written, to my knowledge.
But yeah, Peter Berg was going to do a version.
Oh, can you imagine how shitty that would be?
Oh, God.
Peter Berg's made one good movie,
Rundown?
Friday Night Lights.
I like
Oh,
Rundown.
Rundown. Okay, he's
Yeah.
made two good movies.
Yeah, Rundown.
What is better? Well, okay, hold on. What's the one with Mark Wahlberg, the army one, where they're behind the lines?
Oh, I've actually never seen it.
That
but I
was
know-
not bad.
That was
Okay,
not bad.
all right. I'm sorry, Peter Berg. You just made that
And didn't
one
he do the
shitty
one
movie.
about the oil?
This is what
he
Peter
just
Berg-
did the one
That
about
one's
the oil.
okay. That one's okay.
But we're talking about
That's Deep
battleship.
Star 6.
We're talking about battleship,
It's Deepwater Horizon, sorry.
and we're talking about battleships. Peter Berg
Battleship is a terrible
and
movie.
Hancock, Petersburg.
All right, Hancock's not terrible.
It's not bad.
All right, Peter Berg, I'm sorry.
I actually like Peter Berg. I was just letting Joe go with it.
No, this
Anyway.
is why Peter Berg won't do our show now.
Peter Berg
Peter
wasn't
Berg,
going to
you
do
do
our
my
show
spin-off.
ever again.
Peter
But-
Berg, you can do my spinoff called Breaking Bonehead.
No, it's James loves Peters. After that, it's Peter Goober. After that, it's Peter Coyote.
Peter Aykroyd.
Peter Ham.
Sorry.
That's probably not his name. I'm probably screwed that up. Let's move on.
I just want to hashtag James
Yeah.
loves Peters. So Dune. I'm
Hashtag
talk about
blessed.
Dune. I don't have a whole lot else to go about it. Go ahead.
All right. So I think are we doing this now?
Let's do it.
All right.
So, okay, you want to do the
What
introduction?
are you doing?
We're gonna tag team this one because I'm doing the book side of it. This actually is considered a cursed project by many people. The Confederacy of Dunces.
Are you sure it's
never-
not called Bonehead?
If you no, we've got something on film and it's out there.
All I can tell you,
Maybe hate it.
if you're listening to us now, sit down. This is an interesting story. It will take some time.
But Chad's
it's
gonna
told by
cover
you two, right?
Chad's going to cover the movie side of it. But what I didn't know as much about the movie side. I know about the book side of it because it's also considered a quote unquote cursed book, which leads into the movie issues. So, Confederate of Dunces it won a Pulitzer. It's considered a great novel. It won a Pulitzer in 1980. The problem with that is the guy that wrote it killed himself in 1969. The story behind that was John Kennedy Toole was the author, and he
There's just so many easy jokes with that.
he was Catholic. He slid into depression after Kennedy was assassinated.
Do you think it was him?
No. He had wrote one other book called The Neon Bible that he started in high school. He was heavily influenced by Flannery, and he wrote that. He actually got a job teaching creative writing. He was in the military. He got drafted in the military and was stationed in Puerto Rico and started writing Confederacy of Dunces during that time. Came back, worked as a teacher at a all-Catholic girls' school.
Yeah.
Finished the book. Now, he sent this book, or it landed at the desk of Robert Gottlieb. And if you're not familiar, Robert Gottlieb was an editor for a major publishing company who had discovered... Yes, Joe?
I really have a legitimate question.
Yeah.
Any relation to Carl Gottlieb?
I actually do not know the answer
Carl
to that.
Gottlieb was a writer. He was he actually was a comedy writer, but he ended up writing Jaws. So
Yeah.
legitimate question. Keep going.
And there may be, because Robert Gottlieb was known for finding excellent comedy.
I wonder if I bet there is.
Because he discovered Joseph Heller, and he's the one that actually got Joseph Heller to finish Catch-22. So anyway, Toole really wanted to work with him because he admired Joseph Heller. They went back and forth for 2 years on the book Confederacy of Dunces. And Gottlieb's words basically were, this is great, this is awesome, this is perfect, this is hilarious. But it has no point. And he was floored by it. So what Confederacy of
We're
Dunces...
not talking about Bonehead.
Confederacy of Dunces it comes from a Jonathan Swift. The title comes from a Jonathan Swift quote where Swift said, you can always tell the presence of genius because it will be being torn apart by dunces in their confederacy or something. Anyway, the point to the book is the protagonist is a genius, but he's very, very lazy, and it's about how he just deals with the world. It doesn't have a linear arc. It doesn't have a story. It is just his observations of the world. So it doesn't have a solid start or a solid end. Gottlieb said, we can't publish it. It got sent to a couple more places. Gottlieb came back and actually said, listen, if you'll change it, if you'll give him a solid story arc, we'll publish it. We think you're one of the funniest people on the planet. By the way, at this time, Toole was only 30. And he said, no. And his exact quote, and I wanted to get his quote right, was Gottlieb finally said, it doesn't have a reason. The book has no reason to exist. And his quote back was something like, I can't change these characters. These characters are the way that they are, and they are real people, and they are my soul. After it got turned down again, it got turned down a couple more times, he committed suicide. His mother fell into a deep depression, and one day she was in his room, and she found a smudged copy. He had sent off every copy that he had. There was one copy that had a smudge on it. The text, when it was mimeographed, had smudged.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew it couldn't be sent off. His mother found it after he committed 2 years after he committed suicide. And she goes, I know my son's brilliant. He got these letters from editors saying he was funny. We're going to get this book published. She started sending it out. And it failed. Failed horribly for a couple more years. Sent it to over 7 publishers. All of them expressed interest, but said it has to be changed. And her exact quote was, every time she got it back, she died a little bit more inside. So she was already battling depression. 1976.
So I'm glad I didn't start drinking before this episode.
He totally did.
1976, Walker Percy, who was an author that most people at the time would have known, when nobody knows him now. If you know Walker Percy, or if you are Walker Percy, prove me wrong.
Come on, Bonehead.
Yeah. But he was faculty at Loyola at the time, and Thelma Toole, who was the mother, became convinced he'll get it published. He's an author already, and they were all from Louisiana. He'll help. He'll help make me get my sons out. She blew up his office so much with phone calls and letters. This was pre-email. In the late 70s saying, you got to read my son's work, you got to read my son's work. To which he would respond, have your son come in, have him take one of my classes. He's dead, he can't do it. And finally, he complained to his wife saying, there is a crazy woman that's stalking me at work. To which she responded by showing up and actually breaking into his office. Pushed by his secretary, pushed by everybody in the department, actually went into the office and said, here's my son's work. The only way she would leave is if he promised to read it. And he said, it's a quote from him, I read it with the hopes that it would absolutely suck. That I could read 10 pages and it would be such terrible writing that I could go, there's a reason nobody will publish this. He read it and loved it. Even with his backing, it took 3 more years before it could get published. When it finally got published...
This story's taking that long.
When it finally got published, they only would print 2,500 copies. Most of which actually weren't printed correctly. It went on to win the Pulitzer Prize, though, because it was famous. Became a cult novel, and within 1 year, everybody started wanting to make it into a movie. And that's when that curse kicked in.
So, let's see if you could do this, only make it entertaining.
I'm sorry, it's a book, Joe. It has pages. You should try reading them instead of burning them.
So this movie has officially been in development hell for 33 years.
Just like I've been in hell for 38.
38.
So let's start with the first attempt. And you'll notice a trend with when I go over the facts of this, I'll be listing the actors who were cast or were being considered for the main role.
Yeah.
You'll notice a trend. First attempt. Harold Ramis was going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to co-star Richard Pryor and Ruth Gordon. Who did they want to star in the movie? John Belushi.
I was going to say, and Ignatius, the main character, is supposed to be a heavy-set, slothful, brilliant mind.
Yes. 2 days before...
Much like me.
2 days before he was supposed to...
I was thinking me, but keep going.
2 days before he was supposed to discuss taking on this role,
Yes.
he passed away from a drug overdose, as most people know. 5 months after his death, because they were still moving forward with this movie. This is what ultimately killed the first attempt. The movie takes place in New Orleans, in Louisiana. So they were going to shoot in Louisiana.
It's very important to the book.
Yes. With the movie still in development, the head of the Louisiana Film Commission was killed in a murder-suicide. And it was her death that eventually put the movie on hold. From that point, the movie rights went to an oil baron named John Langdon. In the second attempt, 2 people were considered. John Candy and Jonathan Winters. Now, a side note to my research, I knew about this before. This was the one movie I actually want to talk about because I knew it had an interesting story. I thought John Candy was cast and he died shortly after.
Now, this would have been way before he died.
This was in the early 80s.
Yeah.
So everybody knows John Candy eventually passed away. So you can't contribute that to the curse because it was over a decade after he was.
It's a slow-moving curse.
Yes. But they were eventually decided against because Candy was being too over the top. They didn't think he could grasp the role of this character. And Jonathan Winters was rejected for being too old.
I would imagine, yeah.
Because the character's supposed to be 26, I believe, and he was well into his 50s.
There are some
He'd have
people
been in
that
his 60s
argue
probably,
that
wouldn't
the
it?
character, that Ignatius is a parody that was literally Tool parodying himself, how brilliant he was, but how much he struggled dealing with the world around him.
The next actor who was going to be considered was Josh Mostel.
Son of...
Zero
Mostel.
Mostel. You know him a lot from if you've seen Billy Madison. He's the principal
Okay.
in that movie.
Zero Mostel is a famous stage actor. He is the producer in The Producers.
The original producers.
Mel Brooks
And
producers for Gene Wilder.
the quote about this was they literally tried every single fat man in Hollywood, and he was the best one for the role.
A funny thing happened on the way to the forum. I'm sorry, keep going.
This is Josh. That's Zero. We're talking about Josh. So then the movie went into hibernation for a few years. Cut to the late '80s. John Waters was actually going to take over the possibility of directing, and his main star was going to be Divine. If everybody knows who Divine is, look him up. He's fantastic. Now,
If you love John Waters and don't know who Divine is, check your
You
papers.
really don't know who John Waters is.
this is the second time it actually got the closest to being made. And what happened? Divine passed away.
Yeah.
And this is a quote from John Waters. "It'll never happen. How can a movie ever live up to that book? So many people have tried to do it. When I tried to do it, it was Divine was alive. We wanted him to play the main part. Some of the top directors in the world have tried to make that movie, and I don't know if it'll ever happen. Maybe it shouldn't."
Right.
Talk of the movie eventually picked up in the 2000s. The first person being considered was John Goodman. There's not a lot of information about what happened with his turn onto it. They then went to another famous actor, Chris Farley. Does anybody want to guess what happened to Chris Farley?
He was on Saturday Night Live and lived happily ever after.
No.
Just like everybody in Saturday
Saturday
Night
Night Live. He
Oh,
didn't have a problem with drugs and alcohol.
He
and was a happy
died.
person.
He died from a heart attack. Something.
He died from
From
drug-induced
drugs.
complications.
And upon his death, the movie went into a stall again until 2004. Now, this is the absolute closest this movie has ever come to being made.
In 2004.
2004.
Okay.
At the height of his career, Will Ferrell was going to play the character, which, in my opinion, it wouldn't have worked.
It's not good.
It's not good casting.
Have you read the book?
I have not, but I know the character.
The character is supposed to be very slothful and very heavy set.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
it's
it is tied, and it also, New Orleans itself is almost a character, like the dialect and all of that
yeah,
stuff.
very sloth-like is not Will Ferrell's motif.
Right.
Here's the cast, because they had this movie. It was going. Lily Tomlin, Mos Def, Drew Barrymore, and Olympia Dukakis. The script was written by Scott Kramer and Steve Soderbergh, and it was going to be directed by David Gordon Green of Pineapple Express fame. The movie eventually stalled, and here's David Gordon Green's quote about what happened. "To the disappointment of many of us, Dunce's was put on hold last year. They assembled a great cast, and I adopted New Orleans as my home. And if you know anything about how movies are made, this is where everything went to crap. But politics over property rights. It torn between Miramax, Paramount, and various camps of producers.
Oh, yeah.
Put a weight on the project that wasn't creatively healthy to work within.
You know what a weight on the project means is that everybody had to get paid out.
Everybody had to get paid out.
Right.
And here's Steven Soderbergh's
The filmmaker Steven Soderbergh helped
Yes.
write the screenplay.
yes. Oceans, Steve Soderbergh.
Okay. Yeah.
Limey.
Yeah. I love that movie.
I do too.
I don't know what's happening with it. I think it's cursed. I'm not prone to superstition, but that project has got bad mojo on it. So, cut to later on, Jack Black was attached at some point, but nothing never really went with that. I could not find any details. The final attempt came in 2012. Zach Galifianakis was attached with a script from Phil Johnston, Cedar Rapids. Watch it, it's hilarious.
Cedar Rapids?
Yes.
Yes, it is. It's not bad.
And it was going to be directed by James Bobbin of The Muppets and...
Fly the Conchords.
Yeah, and I'm not going to mention the Alice in Wonderland sequel.
Alice Through the Looking Glass.
Yeah, woof. But the production was delayed again because he went on to direct the sequel to The Muppets, called The Muppets.
Most Wanted.
Yes, but at the time it was called The Muppets again. Anyway,
Which is a better title.
To wrap up this long discussion of the Confederacy of Dunces, the best quote I could find was from Harold Ramis in 2009. My final analysis of it is that the Confederacy violated one of the basic bylaws of movie comedy. With the producer Mike Schamberg articulated, he said, comedy works two ways. Either you have a normal person in an extraordinary situation or an extraordinary person in a normal situation. And Confederacy was about an extraordinary person in a series of extraordinary situations.
Yeah, so how do you get that? How do you convey something?
And it doesn't have a plot. I mean, it was, like I said, it's Seinfeld before Seinfeld. It is a book about nothing except everything's extraordinary. And it doesn't, even saying that out loud, well, what does that mean? That's what the book's about.
So you've read the book?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a great book. It's a great book. In its own way, it is not like Dune, but in its own way, it is like Dune. How do you take something that is so and make it?
Yeah. So when we decided to talk about this topic, I thought I could mention a million movies that I know were in development that never got to made. But as for a movie that's been in development that had an interesting story, I don't think anything beats the Confederacy of Dunces.
No, that's really good. I can't really top that. And that's the end of the episode.
No, we can't leave
No,
there because I've got things that are more horrible. But you go ahead.
I've got one more. I mean, I have a list of things here. Really quick, I want to go over 2 or 3. I would Romero's Mummy. Romero did it sounds like I'm name dropping, so watch your toes. When I moderated Romero's panel a few years ago, he wanted to talk about the things that got away, which was really cool.
That was before he was dead.
Before he was dead, yeah, because he's not that big of a zombie fan. So he wanted to talk about the things that got away. I already knew about most of them, but a couple of them that did get away that I would have liked to have seen is his version of The Mummy. I would have also really loved to have seen his version of Resident Evil.
Yeah.
I would have also liked to have seen John Carpenter, if you all know, was made one of my favorite films of all time called The Thing. But when The Thing came out, it came out 2 weeks before a movie called E.T. in the summer of '82, which, if you know anything about film, '82 is considered one of those years that is just ingrained.
Yeah.
What do you call that? Watershed?
Yeah.
One of those watershed years of filmmaking. And I could sit here and just ramble off everything from Star Trek to The Wrath of Khan to the original Blade Runner, yada, yada, yada. But The Thing came out that summer, and his next movie was going to be a little Stephen King book called Firestarter. Well, Firestarter was made a few years later, but it wasn't made by John Carpenter.
We're not bringing up Stephen King again, buddy.
I know, but I'm just saying.
You're cut off.
I'm just saying, I would have loved to have seen his version.
Yeah.
The Thing came out and went, and he got fired.
Yeah.
From making his Firestarter. So there's a lot of different movies I'd like to have seen about that, but one of the movies that I would have loved to have seen would have been made by Steven Spielberg, and it's called Watch the Skies or Night Skies. Mm-hmm. So E.T. came out and was very successful. This story had been around before E.T., and they wanted to do a sequel, and he didn't want to do a sequel, and yada, yada, yada. And there's a script that had been walked back and forth and he'd been working on called either Watch the Skies, Night Skies, depending on what part of development you're going from Close Encounters on. At one time he wanted Tobe Hooper to direct it. Tobe Hooper would go on to direct Poltergeist, and that's a whole other podcast episode, and Toby's not here to defend himself anymore, so we're not going to really get into that, about who directed Poltergeist. Right. However, Night Skies is the dark version of E.T. It takes place in a farmhouse in Kentucky, and basically they have to fight off evil aliens.
Huh.
And here's the thing about Night Skies or Watch the Skies. You go look it up. It's a fascinating story of movies that never got made that would have been so interesting or so cool to see. However, I would love to have seen Spielberg go dark once.
Yeah.
He's in his seven, and by the way, I'm not throwing shade at Spielberg whatsoever. He's probably going to be known, after all is said and done, him, Hitchcock, probably as some of the greatest filmmakers of all time, right?
You can't argue that about
He'll
Spielberg.
go down in the top 5, probably, after all said and done. And
by the way, you could argue that AI and Minority Report are a bit dark.
They are a bit dark. No, you know why? Because AI originally was going to be directed by Stanley Kubrick.
Yes.
Kubrick is the one who wanted to do an AI film for a whole time. He and Spielberg were friends, so we're getting into, I'm jumping, right? We're friends. He dies, and Spielberg finally goes, all right, I'm going to make AI. In fact, his next movie was supposed to be Minority Report. Do you guys know this?
No.
He postponed Minority Report for a year so he could go ahead and make AI.
Wow.
AI, from everything I can find, Kubrick's original version ends where, if you've ever seen Artificial Intelligence, by the way, I like the movie. A lot of people crap on it.
I think it too.
I think 10 years, 12 years later...
It's better than Bicentennial Man.
Yes, it's gotten a better rap, right? Chris Columbus. Oh, Chris Columbus. Anyway, so AI is a good movie. However, Kubrick's version ended with that little boy praying to the blue fairy, trapped in that water for eons.
Wow.
Now, that's a dark movie.
Yeah.
Spielberg's version does not end there.
Yeah.
Right? Now, how many people would have got pissed off and walked out of that theater and demanded their money back? I have no idea. But how much more would you have been talking about that 10 years later? He left that little boy in that water praying to the blue fairy. Yeah. Now, I'm not going to explain the whole plot to AI. Go out and watch AI.
I'll flip the script on that, though. If I knew it was a Kubrick film, I would have got what I paid for. If it was a Spielberg film and it ended that way,
if you're a film buff like us, if you're an actual cinephile like us, yes, you knew you're getting paid for. But it has a happier ending. An artificial intelligence race comes back later. By the way, I didn't realize that those aliens at the end are actually AI themselves. Did you know that?
No.
They are.
Son of a
Look it up. Right. Yeah, I don't think it explains it very well. But
no,
anyway.
it doesn't.
And he gets to live the whole perfect day before he dies, which is a very sweet ending. I'm not knocking Spielberg once again. I actually like AI. I liked it when I saw it in the theater when everybody else crapped on it.
Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting movie, and it's beautiful. Visually, it's one of his best films. Mm-hmm. But anyway, wouldn't you have liked to have seen Spielberg do it? I mean, the man is now in his 70s. He's got The Post coming out. Like I've said, I'm excited for Ready Player One. You can argue about
Indiana
Shawshank.
Jones Part 6.
You can argue Shawshank. You can argue Schindler's List. You could argue all the World War II films.
By the way, I can't believe when we said he didn't do a dark movie, we didn't mention Schindler's List.
It's not in the sense of what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
That is historically accurate. And then at the end, it still has hope.
Yeah.
Right?
You're right.
Even Saving Private Ryan ends with, he lived and he's surrounded by his family.
Yeah.
And they gave him the opportunity to have a family.
Yeah.
See, I'm really passionate about this, thinking about it right now. We have never seen Spielberg go dark. I would like to have seen that. We saw him do comedy. We saw 1941, right? Mm-hmm. We've never seen him go dark. And I would like to, I know you're not listening to my little crappy podcast. Who am I in Kentucky to say one way or the other what you should and shouldn't do to the greatest filmmaker probably living right now, or one of? But one movie, brother, before you go.
Yeah.
Do one mean one. It's not going to tarnish your legacy. Nobody's going to say, oh my God, he did that one mean one where the aliens just beat the shit out of people in a small Kentucky town. They're not going to do anything to you.
Yeah.
And at this point, it could be a metaphor for the way government treats small towns. See what I did there?
Right. Even War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
He lightens it up.
Yeah, well.
He has a brand. And I get that he has a brand, and God knows he has a good $1 billion. I know, I'll get off of it now. I'm sorry. That was mine. I would have liked to have seen him go dark with a nasty, nasty alien movie.
This was, okay, so do you...
No.
Okay.
I covered enough time with the Confederacy. I want you two to go.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing this name correctly. It's a famous French director, artist, etc. Alain Renee.
All you do, dude, is end it with
He made a couple sci-fi films, and I'm
going to shove this croissant down your throat.
He went different with that than I thought he was going to.
His 1968 film, Je t'aime. Anyway, he's
I've heard of that.
Yeah, he's well known as being very artistic, very cerebral.
Uh-huh.
That means brain movies.
Cut to 1971. Turns out he's a huge nerd who loves comic books. And somebody says, oh, you're in New York for a film. If you want to meet this guy I know that works in comic books. It was Stan Lee. Stan Lee and Renee, R-E-S-N-A-S. I don't have a French accent. I can't fake it.
Yeah.
But anyway, they hit it off. And they say, okay. And Renee said, oh, we films. We must do films together. And Stan Lee goes, sure, you write one, I write one, we'll work on each other's. 2 films were supposed to come out of this collaboration. One was called The Inmates, and that was the one Renee started on and Lee finished. It was a Bronx set story that had to do with the fact that the entire human planet, the entire Earth as we know it...
The human planet.
Well, that's actually...
Human planet.
It was originally going to be called The Human Planet. And our relationship with the rest of the cosmos. And how, in some ways, we're jailed on Earth, and very cerebral science fiction based. And Lee came in and finished it up, and it was going to be a very philosophical story, but that got into what does it actually mean to be human. The one Lee started and Renee finished was called The Monster Maker, and it was going to be about a B-movie Roger Corman type director, and Lee wrote it to be largely autobiographical. Who makes these terrible B movies that the population, the people love, everybody loves these crap movies, and he dreams of doing something more. But every time he tries to go above the art that he's known for, people go, no, stick to what you're good at. And both of these scripts were written, both of them were bounced around. As recently as 1998, Stan Lee said Renee died, and said, what's going to come of these? And he did an interview, and he goes, they're done. They're dead. And he said, somebody could pick him up, the script, and make them. But they're not going to be as artistic as he would have made them. He was a brilliant mind who elevated anything he worked on. And so they're dead. So Monster Maker and The Bronx. The Inmates were 2 projects that had one of the leading French science fiction filmmakers and one of the most pop culture influences of the 20th century working together literally across oceans, and both scripts were finished, both scripts were ready to go.
He's going to say Oceans of Time.
I
don't know why.
Nothing will ever come of them now.
Poetic.
So there you go. I thought that was fascinating that you had a French filmmaker known for being so artistic and so high thought who loved American comic books.
But that's how life works. Your turn? No?
Go.
You're good? Oh, well, okay. Mine aren't even on the list, but that reminds me of 2 movies I would have loved to have seen. See, John Landis, for you all out there, Animal House, American Werewolf in London, was going to make a William Gaines biopic.
Oh, really?
Remember a few years ago. Oh, wouldn't you have loved to see that?
I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah.
And John Landis is the man who should have made that.
Yeah.
I would love to talk to him about it someday. John Landis, if you're out there listening, please come on and talk to us about it. It'd be great.
Tell the audience if they don't know who William Gaines is.
William Gaines, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right, was later being known for the publisher of Mad Magazine, but that's not how he got his start. He published Tales from the Crypt, he was the editor of those magazines Tales from the Crypt.
Got pulled before Congress and everybody else for basically
the comic
pornographic charges.
For the
led to the comic code.
Yeah, and he was a central figure in the whole court case, and then later on would have a whole other career in Mad Magazine.
Yeah.
And he's a fascinating man. The other one is Joe Dante's film. Is it The Man with Kaleidoscope Eyes? I can't remember the title, but it's about Roger Corman. He got so close that he actually did a live reading of the script with
and now Joe Dante actually started under Roger Corman. Correct?
Corman, working for Roger Corman. And I may have the title screwed up. If I am, I'm so sorry. Joe Dante, once again, come on Bonehead and talk to us. That would be great. That'd be great. Joe Dante directed The Howling, Gremlins, and worked on Rock and Roll High School for Corman. Started out editing the commercials.
Yeah.
For the trailers for the movies. That's how he started out. That's what he did. So. Anyway.
Great interviews.
And it was the guy from Saturday Night Live. He plays Stefan. What's his name?
Bill Hader?
Bill Hader was going to play Roger Corman, which I think is probably one of the best casting choices.
Yeah, you couldn't go wrong with that.
Am I right? If I say that out loud, you go, oh yeah, no.
Yeah, that's it.
Right?
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Wouldn't you love to see that movie?
I would love to see that movie.
Directed by Joe Dante.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
All right.
I've got more. Keep going. We'll go back and forth.
David Cronenberg's Frankenstein. Y'all ever heard the story about that?
I don't know the whole story.
I don't know. I
never come up till I started researching it.
I love the story of David Cronenberg's Frankenstein.
By the way, everybody's wanted to make Frankenstein from Del Toro.
David Cronenberg
say,
didn't want to make Frankenstein. That's the best part of this story.
I was going to say, before you get onto that, we could do a whole episode on Del Toro movies that we're dying to see.
Oh, yeah,
That'll never get made.
That'll never get made. I mean, I thought about bringing them up for this episode. I thought about Haunted Mansion, Frankenstein,
Justice League Dark.
Justice League Dark.
Justice League Dark. Oh my God, the movies Del Toro has said he was going to do.
Wind in the Willows. He worked on the Wind in the Willows.
I was going to say, well, and Del Toro.
I'd love to see
one of my
Wind in the
favorite quotes
Willows.
about Del Toro, and wasn't Del Toro come on the show? We would love to talk to you.
God, yeah.
But Del Toro, one of my favorite quotes about him is he is now more famous for movie aficionados for the projects he didn't do than the ones he has. And he has done some great films.
Because you keep hearing movies that he's going to make, and you're like, oh, and then you hear like Crimson Peak. What the hell is Crimson Peak?
Quick story. Wind of the Willows, really quick. He was meeting with the executive, and the executive came in and says, "Well, can't we get Mr. Toad? Can't Mr. Toad ride a skateboard? Skateboards are really popular right now." He quit and walked out.
Oh my
Keep
God.
going.
Go ahead. So go with David Cronenberg's
The story of David Cronenberg's Frankenstein. This is a true story from David Cronenberg himself. I'm going to read quotes. He was at an event for something they worked on. It was in the 80s, after he had done these huge films, Fly and all that stuff. And Pierre David, who was a Canadian film producer, walked up to him and he goes, hey, listen, tell me what you think. David Cronenberg's Frankenstein. Cronenberg literally just said back to him, that sounds good to me. What about poor Mary Shelley? It was a couple days later.
He's smug the way he would say it.
Cronenberg was looking through Variety, and you can look this image up. If we can get it somehow put on this thing, we'll do it, I guess. He was looking through Variety, and there was a 2-page ad in Variety that said, Pierre David, Victor Solnicki, Claude Heroux, a major cinematic event, David Cronenberg's Frankenstein, a contemporary vision of timeless chilling tale. 2 full-page ad in Variety, so everybody saw it. Cronenberg actually starts to think about it, and
which is why sometimes producers put out 2-page.
And
I'm gonna go to Variety and see how much it would cost to put a 2-page ad out saying Del Toro's The Parent Trap.
And honestly, and for people who don't know how hard it is to get, if you're a director and you've got a green light, you'll normally jump on that quickly, right? If you see a movie that's going to go, you'll jump on it because it's so hard to get. And if it's successful, it usually means you can get whatever it is you want done next.
Yeah.
But Cronenberg, after he saw the ad, started thinking about it, and he said, well, if I do it, it's going to be more of a rethinking than a remake. He wanted it to be more like the novel, which is Del Toro and all of these people have said they want to do too.
Mm-hmm. I thought you were going to say more sex.
But he said that it should
be Cronenberg in the 80s.
He said it should actually, the creature should be the most...
Touche.
The creature should actually be the most intelligent and sensitive being in the movie. And he's not just a beast. But that's as far as he went. He never actually developed it any further. He said, well, if I'm going to do it, this is what it's going to be. And then he let it die. And then he almost did American Psycho with Brad Pitt. That was actually going to be a project that he did.
American Psycho was almost done by several different people.
And then he was going to do Total Recall.
That's another one that was...
And Total Recall, the reason that he actually got dropped from it, he didn't back away from it, they said his version was too close to Philip K. Dick's, and the movie was... they actually looked at him and said, no, we want Raiders of the Lost Ark Goes to Mars.
Yeah.
And he walked away.
Yeah.
So that... David Cronenberg's Frankenstein is an example of a movie that got announced, and the guy that's name was linked to it went, okay, we'll see what... And he thought about it, and nothing else materialized.
You wanna do David Lynch next for our David Lynch fans?
Yeah.
David Lynch's Ronnie Rocket. Ronnie Rocket was going to be his follow-up to almost...
Every time you say it, I go, Red Rocket, Red Rocket.
Red Rocket. Ronnie Rocket was going to be his follow-up to a dozen movies. In fact, as of in the last couple of years, he said, well, maybe I could eventually make it. But
July 2013, he mentioned it.
But the landscape of America looks different now. Do you have the story pulled up?
I can give you the story that he announced. And I'm going to read this directly because I don't want to get this wrong.
No, that's the reason. And then when we read it to you, we're done. We're moving on to the next movie.
Yeah.
Just hear this.
Conceived in the aftermath of Eraserhead, the story follows a detective seeking a mysterious second dimension, aided by his ability to stand on one leg. He is being stalked by the Donut Men who wield electricity as a weapon. Simultaneously, the tale of Ronnie...
Not donuts.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Simultaneously, the tale of Ronnie Rocket unfolds. A teenage dwarf rock star who needs to be plugged into an electrical supply which gives him power over power.
If Buckaroo Banzai can get a green light, why couldn't this? Keep going.
Which he can use to produce music or simply cause destruction.
Wouldn't you have loved to seen that for you Lynch fans out there? Wouldn't you have loved to have seen it?
It'd be an experience.
It'd be an experience.
You
man.
might not like it, but you'd be like, well, I saw Ronnie Rocket.
And because honestly, at the end of the day, it's no more weird than the last season, his final season, or what will probably be the final season of Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the one I wanted to get at. What's your next one, James?
I got two more I really want to do, and I know we're going to run short on time.
That's okay. We doing all right, Haley?
Gladiator 2.
No, Electric Boogaloo in
No.
Vala.
Oh,
Yes,
hold
I know.
on.
No.
Is this
The original
the Russell?
ending.
Is this the Russell
Do
Crowe?
you know what the
Gladiator?
original title was? Nick Cave. What his original title
Nick
was?
Cage. What?
Nick Cave.
I know the plot.
Of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. It was his title. He wrote the script. Gladiator 2: Christ Killer. The basic plot to the script was Crowe's character, I know some of you are sitting there. Wait. Russell
Spoiler!
Crowe's character,
Maximus dies?
Maximus, dies at the end.
I'm
He
not gonna
does
pull
what he's
Maximus
supposed to do.
Took me a second.
Yeah.
He gets vengeance, so to speak, learns
But he
life
does
lesson,
die.
and dies. It was going to end, it was going to begin right after the end of the movie, and he descends into Hades, where the Greek gods send him because they're starting to lose their power. They're fading from memory, and they use some of their remaining power to bring Maximus back and send him on a quest to kill anything that takes away their power. And at one point in the movie, yes, he does. He's actually the person that finally kills Christ. And Nick Cave even said about writing the script, he goes, it wasn't going to happen. He said literally what happened was, a matter of fact, he has this great quote where he talks about Russell Crowe wanted to do another one. He liked playing Maximus. Mm-hmm. So he went back to Ridley Scott and said, hey, can we do another one? And he said, well, Ridley Scott's response, well, it kind of closed.
Yeah.
And he said, well, if we can come up with a way. And I don't know how Nick Cave, who is a musician and a writer, but most people know him as a musician, how he got tied to it. But he said his story of it, Russell Crowe has changed the story a couple times. I told the story differently. I shouldn't say change the story. But Nick Cave's exact words on it was that he got a call from Russell Crowe, said, man, read the script. Not going to happen, mate. Not going to happen. They retooled the script several times.
Mm-hmm.
But the original version of it was he was going to be immortal, and it was actually going to end with him fighting in the Vietnam War.
What the hell?
He was going to be immortal.
You know, I kind of like the immortal Blade Runner thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's stupid. It doesn't even...
It's not even Gladiator.
It's not even
that's
Gladiator.
But it was all going to be tied back. He had to keep the
so they're basically
mythology.
making him the Wolverine.
It had to keep the mythology alive, and that's my only question was, I want to read the script to see how him being involved in Vietnam War somehow kept the Greek mythology
That's
alive.
like Forrest Gump 2, where he becomes a cyborg and fights giant mutant mantises in the future.
But Forrest Gump 2 is another one of those famous movies that almost happened that didn't.
And yeah, no. Because he was going to become a hippie and go on the road with his son,
There were
right?
several different... Yes.
The Gump and Company, the book. You couldn't pick up the book.
Because...
Gump and Company is the sequel to Forrest Gump, written by the same guy. He did write it, let's be blunt, as a cash-in because the movie was such a big success.
Yeah.
And then he went, so people begged him for more Gump stories. So
I
he
have
wrote
never
Gump
read the
Company.
book, but I am assured that Forrest Gump the book is a lot different than Forrest Gump the movie. The
Yes.
character itself is completely different.
Yeah.
So, Gladiator 2 was originally Gladiator 2, Christ Killer. It got bounced around for years. I mean, they kept going back to it. I don't know if Ridley Scott was, but definitely it was shared around.
Oof.
I got one more I want to have to share after this, but if you got another one...
Hold on. What time are we going at?
Keep going. You're okay.
Okay, well, there's a bunch, man. I mean, honestly, go out and watch the
I'm
documentary.
surprised you're not bringing up Del Toro's At the Mouth of Madness.
There is a bunch.
Or The
Chad.
Mountains of Madness.
At the Mountain of Madness is a movie I would love to have seen that almost happened, starring Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise, who can get, within
Tom
reason,
Cruise
anything
was going to
made.
star in Del Toro's At the Mountains of Madness, which is based on a book written by a guy named H.P. Lovecraft. And as much as I love Stuart Gordon, we have never had a big budget Lovecraft film that we have so deserved for 100 years.
I was going to say, and I'd be fine if Stuart Gordon directed a big budget. I'm sure Stuart Gordon would have loved to have a big budget.
I would love to have seen it. And it was going to happen. The only problem that stopped it from happening was that they wanted PG-13. And Del Toro said, I might be able to, but I can't make that promise. That's it. That's the reason. That's all. FYI, look it up. And Tom Cruise says he'd still do it right now. and they would not greenlight $100
But Del
million
Toro said now you can't do it.
R-rated horror film, even though it came out this year and made $500 million
But
worldwide.
Didn't Del Toro say, though, now you can't make it because of Prometheus?
Yeah, he said Prometheus took a little bit of the wind out of the sail.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
that's not the one I was going to talk about. I was going to tell everybody to
Okay.
go out and check out the Superman Lives documentary about Tim Burton's
that is so cool.
I'm not going to talk about it because there's a good documentary that already exists about it. So go out and check it out. Tim Burton was this close to making a Nicolas Cage movie, Superman Lives. This close.
And one of the things that sunk it was some footage leaked, and he's messing with the costume, and it was only going to be his regeneration costume.
And it's going to be directed by Tim Burton. Is produced by Peter Goober, who look it up. Who's not Peter Goober, the other one, John Peters. John Peters, who is notoriously I've read several times. This is true. Who won't read a screenplay? You have to read the screenplay to him so he can envision it. There's a director or two that have went on who've said that he's illiterate. And that's the reason why he does it. It's not the other reason.
Well, he was also Barbara Streisand's former
hairdresser, right?
An eventual boyfriend.
And there's a long story. There's a whole Bonehead Cat 2 episode we could do about John Peters and his life. Anyway,
and the
movie that got made was the Wild Wild West, FYI.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Yeah,
I was going to say, but the thing about Superman Lives, if you're a fan of Tim Burton. Or any of his artwork or anything else, you need to see the documentary about how it got made because the way he envisioned Brainiac, the way he envisioned everything. I
don't know that it's Superman though, is it?
No, but the drawing, I don't care. I would have paid.
At the end of the day, it's not Superman, but
no.
It's his Batman.
I mean,
elements.
It is now, but if you were reading Batman at the time,
not so much.
No, not so much.
No, his movie influenced the comics.
Yeah.
Because it was a hit. What is the documentary called on that?
Superman Lives.
Okay. It's a fascinating.
I just wanted people to go out and watch it. So go ahead with your last one.
All right, I gotta talk about this one because this is one I'd love to see and never will, obviously. This movie actually got filmed. There is some rough cuts of it, but it's not completed. Richard Pryor is going to be his first film. It was called Uncle Tom's Fairy Tales.
Just the name goes a whole.
Oh, I know. Well, here's the backstory on what happened.
They've got top men working on it.
Top men.
Top men.
The backstory on it, there's some people that argue that none of us really know what it's about. One version of what it's about, the only one I could actually find that may be true, is that it was going to be a series of stories told, not unlike the story of mankind where people are on trial, but a group of Black Panthers were going to kidnap a random white guy and put him on trial for everything that white people had done wrong.
Oh my God, I gotta see this movie.
And the best part was,
I hate crackers.
The reason it was called Uncle Tom's Fairy Tales was it was going to reenact all the things when he tried to come up with what white people did right. There was going to be historical flashbacks to, this is what happened, and see, white people aren't all bad. And of course, it was all going to be horribly inaccurate, historical, and all that stuff. 50 minutes, and Penelope Spheris?
Penelope Spheris. She went on to direct Wayne's World.
And did 3 documentaries.
3 documentaries called The Decline of Western Civilization about rock and roll. Check them out, by the way. I'm serious. Check them out. They're fantastic.
She was the film editor. Richard Pryor actually was going to star and direct. It was filmed. 50 minutes were complete. There's 2 stories about why we'll never see it. And they compete. Nobody is actually sure. Penelope Spheris is probably the only one that knows which is more accurate.
We should reach out to
One is true. One is true, we know for sure. But it doesn't explain why we can't see it now. They were doing a screening of it, Penelope Spheris and him, and they were screening it so they could get ready to take it the 50 minutes they had done to producers. Richard Pryor's second wife stormed into the room, said, You don't care about me. There may have been drugs involved. And you don't care about me. You care about
little Richard.
You care more about your little movies more than you do me. And Richard Pryor, in a fit of anger, and evidently the fight went on, and Penelope Spheris literally was sitting there the entire time, slowly leaning back in her chair. And finally, Richard Pryor snapped and said, I care more about my movie than you. Oh, look, you're talking. I'm trying to screen my movie. I'll show you. And grabbed the film and started just shredding it.
Holy.
But it's a believable story.
Penelope Spheris was able to preserve the film and splice what she could back together. Now, this is where the story, and some people go, well, that was really the end of it. there's another story that goes that wasn't the end of it. She took what she spliced back together, and Richard Pryor knew they had to have, as he said, a big black name to back it. So who did they go to? Who was socially acceptable in the 1970s to white American culture?
Bill Cosby.
Shaft.
They went to Bill Cosby.
Oh.
Bill
Shaft? He's a black private dick who's a sex machine with all the chicks.
Shut your mouth. I'm talking about this movie. Bill. So they took it to Bill Cosby.
Look it up, by the way. I didn't miss a word. Keep
know,
going.
There's two stories. Then this is where
I was waiting on you to say bad mother.
so
Shut your mouth.
So there's two. So this then breaks into two stories, and it's whichever one you want to believe, I guess.
You're going all Rashomon on us. Go to
Bill Cosby saw it.
Kurosawa.
Bill Cosby saw it, and there's the two sides to it. Is that he agreed to produce it, and then actually said he'd produce all of it, and then just because he saw Richard Pryor as his main competition, and then so he has it, and it's done, and it's not going anywhere. The other side to it is that Richard Pryor had some respect for Bill Cosby.
He did.
He watched it.
They all did.
And Bill Cosby
Everyone
went,
did.
"This is a bit much. It ain't gonna fly." And Richard Pryor then went, "Okay, we're done," and walked away from it.
Oddly enough.
And so that is a true story of Uncle Tom's Fairy Tale, which would have been Richard Pryor putting white people on trial. And if somebody has a pirate copy, I don't know, an old film-to-film of that, and you can put on a screening somewhere, I would love to see that, because Richard Pryor, to me, if he wrote it, if you're a fan of Blazing Saddles, you got to give it a shout.
He was supposed to play the sheriff in Blazing Saddles.
And he wrote it. I mean,
He's
co-wrote
one of the writers. Oh, what in the hell are you doing? We're doing a damn
We're doing a show. What are you doing here? We're
What are you
trying.
on your phone for anyway?
I was looking something up.
I'm gonna.
You can't wait till after the show?
I was looking up something for the.
Uncle Tom's Fairy Tales, though. So that was one of the movies. So half of it got made,
Really quick.
and it's somewhere.
Bill Cosby, by the way, as a supporter of independent African American cinema. If you guys know Mario Van Peebles, his father, Melvin Van Peebles, was a black filmmaker, and he did a movie that made a lot of money called Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, and Bill Cosby wrote him a check for him to be able to finish that movie. FYI.
So
of course, we remember Bill Cosby in a different way now. But, however...
I was having a conversation with some people about this. You do get to the point where you separate the art from the artist.
Yeah, hopefully we can. So that's been our... We could go on. I have another half page.
Oh, yeah.
We may do this again in 6 months to a year if Chad can get off his phone.
I was looking up. I think it's on YouTube.
So he could listen.
Oh, is it?
I think that's what I was looking up.
So
and then,
anyway,
in the jungle.
Thank you all so much. This is leading up to our next episode with Oley and Nick.
Sassone.
And our friend Chris
And we will be talking about the Fantastic Four, which was a movie that not only was made, was advertised, posters were made, everything was done, and then the studio, well, you'll hear the story.
We'll hear the story later on. Thank you so much. This is Bonehead, and we are out.
Have a good one.
John Gooden.
Good. Is this made off of the Clone Wars Yoda?
That's a Clone Wars Yoda. He was holding bourbon on top of the Christmas tree all Christmas. Nobody commented.
Yeah, I see it.
All right, are we ready?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I gotta turn this game off any second.
Oh my God, we're gonna lose valuable footage.
Have you started recording?
Yeah, but I can stop them.
Oh, okay. Well, where are we at? 1:50? All right.
We can wait a minute.
No, I hope Craig Dennis's tears taste delicious. Son of a bitch. Rapist burger.
I mean, Joe, if you want to watch, it's a minute 50.
Are you recording?
You may want to pause it just for 1 second.